From the moment I stepped off the plane, I was impressed with London. The airport was clean and easy to navigate, with ample signage and amenities. The people I saw were civil and calm and well-mannered, and even though the first thing I did was get on the wrong train, it didn't take me long to figure out that I had made a mistake. Since London's public transportation is so well designed and frequent, I simply found a stop with a connection to the correct train and transferred across the platform. This took a total of about 4 minutes, and I was on my way to Peckham. When I exited my train at the Peckham Rye station, my first impression wasn't the greatest. But it didn't take long for me to see why so many people were buzzing about this neighborhood. It was filled with mixed-use urban fabric, including newly updated apartments. After I settled into my flat, I went out on the balcony to find that everything I needed was right outside my front door, including multiple restaurants, shops, and of course, a pub. As I explored the city, I noticed how clean everything was and how much access I had to culture and the arts. Even at a typical mall, there was a theater. Of course, not everything was perfect. I saw this in the underground. But overwhelmingly, London was filled with clean, safe spaces and places I wanted to go. London is filled with the kind of pedestrian infrastructure that causes North American urbanists to cream in their shorts. And no matter where I went, I felt completely safe, even though motor vehicles were abundant. Speaking of motor vehicles, there were lots of options to choose from. The busing was especially useful, with service coverage and frequency that was world-class. Nothing like North America. But if busing isn't your thing, then you'll be happy to hear that there are train stations everywhere. They're above ground, below ground, and the focal point of every neighborhood. But alas, it was time for me to leave London and continue my trip through Europe, with my next stop being Amsterdam. Before I do, let's rank London on my Urbanist Snark scale. Starting with transportation. Any well-designed urban space has 4 transportation options that take you from your front door to every other front door in the city. Those are walking, biking, motor vehicle, and trains. For walking, London gets a C. Generally, you can walk from door to door, but the walking infrastructure isn't separated enough from the motor vehicle infrastructure to feel safe in every instance. There aren't raised crosswalks, and many of the sidewalks are too narrow to feel comfortable. However, due to the ample mixed-use urban fabric, most of everything that you need in your daily life is within walking distance. Moving on to biking, London's biking infrastructure gets a D. The biking infrastructure is essentially just painted lines placing you in motor vehicle traffic. There is little, if any, separation from the motor vehicle right-of-way, and the routes are not city-wide. In London, you cannot bike from door to door, which brings us to the motor vehicle infrastructure, and London gets a B. The roads and streets in London are definitely the most robust of all the transportation options. They're well-maintained and generally safe. There are lots of buses and taxis and plenty of people driving to and fro. Unlike North American streets and roads, London's traffic is minimal. It's busy by European standards, but the queues clear out for every light cycle, and people are generally free to move about the city. I saw minimal traffic jams and congestion while commuting through London. Finally, let's talk about trains. Now, this shouldn't surprise any of you, but London gets an A. The train service in most of London is world-class. You can definitely travel from door to door by train throughout most of the city. The only demerit is that London's train service is not 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, the entire city pretty much shuts down at 11 p.m. during the week, but having the trains shut down was especially annoying. Now let's talk about urban fabric. London has some of the best urban fabric of any city that I visited. They had lots of mixed-use building infrastructure, which made most of life's necessities available within walking distance. The mixed-use urban fabric gets a B. Unlike some other European cities, London also has lots of single-family homes, both detached and attached. Every few blocks, I found myself in another quiet, quaint, single-family neighborhood just steps away from a local pub and grocery store. The single-family building stock in London gets an A. Finally, let's talk about convenience. The overall transportation infrastructure in London is elite, with all your necessities being within walking distance, usually under a quarter mile. Everything in your neighborhood is accessible to you by bus, as are all of your trips into the adjacent neighborhoods. For longer trips that take you into the different boroughs of the city, the train service is incredibly easy and fast, with coverage of the entire city and ample frequency times. In fact, bus and train frequency was usually between 5 and 11 minutes, with my longest wait time being around 17 minutes. Sadly, London's biking infrastructure was severely lacking, with little or no connectivity citywide. Thus, London's overall convenience score is a B+. That gives London the Urbanist Snark overall score of a B. Could I live in London? Yes. Is London head and shoulders above every city in North America? Definitely yes. Is London a top-tier city in Europe? No. It's good, but it's not the best. Leaving London was trivially easy. I simply walked out my front door, took a left, and headed towards my local train station, which was about a 5-minute walk. Once there, I stepped on to the train to Shoreditch High Street Station. This was the closest stop to my final destination in London, the London-Liverpool Street Station. From there, I caught the regional train to Harwich. Let's take a moment to stop right outside the Shoreditch High Street Station. This isn't really what I expected. There isn't much here, and there isn't any signage to help me. However, if I just go with the flow, it seems I'll find my way. The bed that you see to the right of the screen is the first evidence I've seen since arriving in London of homelessness. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't exist here, but this is the first time I've seen anything that would indicate it. Contrast that with the city that you live in North America. If it's anything like mine, there are homeless people on every corner. It's too bad that North America doesn't implement better social systems, like London, to help those poor souls. It should be clear to you that this neighborhood that I'm walking through right now could use some urban improvements. Wider sidewalks, separate bike lanes, and raised crosswalks would be a good start. However, there isn't much traffic here, so walking isn't unpleasant. This was my experience while walking through much of London. When you're not on a main thoroughfare, walking, whether it's in good infrastructure or bad infrastructure, is still rather pleasant because there isn't very much traffic. Some of you might not like the graffiti that you see, and if I'm being honest, it doesn't bother me. I don't love it, but it's just one aspect of a thriving city, one that I can accept. Let's pause here for a moment and just admire this fantastic mixed-use building. Now, all the buildings we've passed so far on this walk have been mixed use, but this one is particularly nice. I always smirk under my breath a little bit when I hear other urbanists talking about urban fabric of Cleveland or Philadelphia or Pittsburgh or St. Louis. There's nothing like this urban fabric in any of those places. In fact, there's nothing like this urban fabric in any city in North America, except for maybe Boston and New York. But this typical 5-story with a storefront on the main floor and apartments or offices or more retail on the 5 floors above is everywhere. It's ubiquitous in London, and it makes for an exceptional urban experience. These narrow streets are especially welcoming. In fact, this neighborhood is fantastic. Cobblestone streets, well-maintained. This might be the nicest building stock in all of London. Think of how nice it would be to live on this street, just seconds away from everything you need. Look at how nicely maintained everything is, how clean everything is, and how welcoming and easy it is to be in this space. Think of how nice it must be to live at that unit right there. Big, beautiful English oak door, arched windows. Now, I've looked up some of the prices for living in this neighborhood. And don't get me wrong, living in this area is expensive, especially for things like rent or if you want to purchase. But interestingly, there were quite a few options that were in what I would consider pretty much everybody's price range. For instance, if you don't mind having flatmates, you can live in this neighborhood for £600. That's not too bad. If you want to live by yourself and you don't mind living in a smaller space, you can pay £1,600. You could pay £2,500. If you want a really nice space, like a 4-bedroom, 2-bath condominium, you're going to pay for it. It's going to be upwards of £4,000, but look at what you get. Look at where you live. Now, don't get me wrong. Living in London is expensive, except when you consider that in London, you don't need a car. You don't need health insurance. College tuition is cheaper, and there are ample student aid benefits. There are also ample childcare benefits, including free childcare, plus a lot more. Most North Americans that I talk to about living in London, or Europe in general, fail to calculate these benefits into their claim that London is too expensive. They often say things like, it's much easier living here in Denver. And that's only true if your car doesn't break down, or you don't get sick, or you don't need glasses or braces. You don't attend college, or if you don't have any children, or if you're not disabled. The truth of the matter is it's much easier to live in London, even though the real estate in London is a little bit more expensive. And that's because of the value of life here and the quality of life. As North Americans, we really need to reconsider our calculations and focus more on quality of life. Now, ironically, when I bring up that Europeans have a higher quality of life than North Americans, the response is a unanimous, well, yeah, thus rendering any previous claims and statements pointless. What matters is your quality of life. Young people don't value healthcare until they get sick. People without children don't value childcare until they have children. All of this is available to you in places like London. And yes, you're going to pay a bit more to live in these neighborhoods, but it shouldn't really even be possible for you to live here at under £2,000 a month. And yet it is. Here's one of the main through streets, and you can tell by the traffic. Clearly, there's more people, more buses, a metro running right underneath us, and more traffic, more motor vehicles. Some of you might be wondering, what's the significance of mixed-use buildings? What makes them such a vital and important aspect of good urban design and urban fabric? Well, the key to good mixed-use buildings is that it brings all the things that one needs in daily life within reach. When you live in a mixed-use neighborhood, all of your daily needs, your food, your water, your exercise, everything is right there because mixed-use buildings offer you a mixture of uses. You'll have restaurants, daycare, healthcare, grocery stores, clothing stores, all the things you'll need on a daily basis are going to be at street level. And above that are going to be other offices and businesses. So your job is very likely to be on the second, third, or fourth floor of a mixed-use building. Not only that, you'll probably live in a mixed-use building because the top 4 or 5 floors are often residences. Having mixed-use infrastructure in place and readily available makes your life much more convenient because you don't have to drive. You don't even have to take a train or a bus. In a well-designed mixed-use neighborhood, you're never more than a block or maybe 2 away from everything you need every day. And that's incredibly valuable. If we pause again here for a brief moment, have a look at that mixed-use building on the corner. Again, what delightful architecture. What a nice structure. We've got 5 stories with businesses on the main floor and either residences or offices or other businesses above that. Think of how nice it would be to live on this street, in this corner, even with all this hustle and bustle. Right below you, you've got 5 different restaurants to choose from, a cigar bar, which I wouldn't personally use, but it might be nice to have nearby, a bus station just bustling with activity and availability of transportation options to take you anywhere you need to go in the city. This infrastructure, this experience, is the kind of thing people in North America talk about wanting or relay to you upon returning from a vacation, maybe from Disney World or some other such horrid place. where they say things like, "I had such a good time. There was a McDonald's within walking distance." In London, everything's within walking distance, not just McDonald's. And alas, we've arrived. The London Liverpool Street Station. I'd have to admit that when I first saw the exterior of this building, I was a little bit confused. Should I go in this way or that way? I chose that way. As it turns out, it didn't matter much. As soon as I walked in, I became aware of exactly where I was. And for a moment, I was struck with awe. Immediately, I was reminded of Denver's main station. In Denver, they call it Union Station. I don't know why. But the reason I was reminded was because of how poorly this station made Union Station look. First off, there is no ticker in Union Station, no signage, and nothing to buy or to sit and do. Union Station in Denver is a barren wasteland of nothingness, with no direction whatsoever regarding what trains are coming or buses, where they're going, and how you should get to them. This station, it was obvious and clear where I should go. I should walk up to this giant board filled with information about travel in the UK. Now, being a tourist, I took my time wandering around, looking at things. But just look at how much information is available to me. This departure and arrivals board, or ticker board as I call it, has more information on it than any place I've ever been in the United States. In fact, come to think of it, I think this train station has more transit options to go to more places than any place I've ever been in the United States. And I've been to New York City, although I've never been to Grand Central Station. And while this is a major transportation hub in London, this isn't their largest station. This is just one of many neighborhood stations that's so well connected, they need a gigantic board to keep track of everything. Now, I arrived at the station pretty early, so my train to Harwich wasn't even posted yet, and I had to go ask some people, some folks that worked here, what I was supposed to do. But first, I walked around for a little while and checked out the station. One of the nice things about train stations in London is that many of them, and perhaps all of them, are built to be welcoming. If you're a geek like me and you love transportation, you can actually just go to these stations and walk around, look at the different shops, read the different signs, and sort of geek out on all this cool stuff, especially in a station like this that has very clearly been maintained and designed for people. After a while, I figured out where I was supposed to go, and then I went there. And upon talking to one of the nice people that worked there, they informed me that I was still too early and that I should probably wait. So I did. Finally, it was time to board my train to Harwich and get on my way. Now, this isn't a luxury train service, but as you can see, it's quite nice. And interestingly, not that many folks are traveling out to Harwich, but you wouldn't know it based on the schedule. While it didn't have the kind of frequency that you would expect maybe in an inner-city London train, this train left every 30 minutes. Now, for those of you that don't know, Harwich is a tiny little city to the northeast of London. And from there, there's an international port where I can catch my ferry to the Hook of Holland. It's an overnight ferry service. And finally, we're off. There's a feature on this camera to do everything in fast forward. I don't know if it's called time lapse or speed or something like that. I figured I'd try it out to see what it looks like. I must say I don't love it, but it's kind of cool. If we pause here for a moment, you'll get a chance to see some of the housing just outside of London. We're not very far from central London, and here we see a wonderful row of single-family homes, followed by some mixed-use building infrastructure. Even in the outskirts of London, even in the small towns or suburbs, we still see this wonderful design. This is an urban space built for people. At every stop, I noticed something. The train station isn't surrounded by parking lots, and it's not next to a giant highway. It's a place I would actually want to go, and there's mixed-use development and single-family homes right there, right outside the train station. We can see them from the windows. Contrast that with North American train infrastructure. We're not even in the city, And the train station is designed and has been developed around so that there are places you want to go. In North America, in the heart of Denver, let's say, there's nothing for you when you step off your train and into your train station. It's just endless mile after mile of parking lot and stroads and highways and other places that just suck. This is the Manningtree station. I had to make a stop here because I need to transfer onto a different train that'll take me all the way out to Harwich. One good thing about train stations in the UK is they have a pub. And not just a place to get a crappy coffee and a cheap sandwich, but a pub, a real place to get a beer. And interestingly, there were quite a few fellas here just hanging out, drinking. Finally, I was on my train and on my way to Harwich. Rural England, or I guess not as urban England, is a mixture of cute little spaces with old buildings and decent infrastructure. Now, I was surprised to learn that the real estate in Manningtree was actually much more expensive than I thought it would be, and your options for where to live were much fewer. There's a lot more single-family units here and a lot less mixed use. It's more spread out, and the infrastructure is much more motor vehicle-centric. In the UK, if you had to choose between living in Manningtree and London, I think the easy, obvious answer is London. For the amount of money that you're going to spend and for what you get for that money, London just has so much bigger bang for your buck. Now, it would seem that it's impossible for me to go where I'm supposed to. I always seem to get off at the wrong place or go down the wrong street or miss my exit in some way, and this is what happened to me here. However, there is some logic for why I got off at this stop and not the one in Harwich. This is the International Port Station. This is where I'll be launching my ferry to the Hook of Holland. Now, I assumed that there would be some lockers here where I could put my luggage, but I was, unfortunately, turned away. They had no such lockers, and so there was no place for me to keep my things while I went into Harwich and explored. Not only that, but I was sad to see that there isn't really much around the port. The port itself is an industrial space. There's lots of trucking, and there's cranes, and there's a lot of trains, but there isn't really much else. Those folks that are walking are actually walking over to a small town that's probably 2 miles away. Now, I just didn't want to go there, so I didn't. Finally, I made my way to Harwich, which was my final destination until midnight tonight when I would launch from the international port to the Hook of Holland. As you can see, Harwich is a tiny English town. There's almost nothing here. There's almost no reason to come here. But, wouldn't you know it, there's a bus right over there that looks like I'm going to miss that would take you into Harwich. Because even in small communities where there's really no reason to drive anywhere because it's so tiny, they have bus service for everybody. You know, like a civilized country. Now, Harwich is almost unbearably quaint, unbearably cute, and filled with the kind of people that you see in movies. You'll notice that this urban fabric is similar to what you might see in a North American city in the old trolley car system or the downtown area. These are mixed-use buildings. They're not as tall as the ones that we were used to seeing in London, but they are mixed use. Some of them are just residences on the main floor. Some of these windows I would look into and see people eating dinner or supper or whatever, tea time. Others are businesses on the main floor with residences above. I took a while to just walk around and get a sense of the city. I made my way out to the point to see what might be out here. I was interested in these ports. There's a lot of infrastructure and a lot of boats and interesting things to see that I'm not used to seeing. I live in Denver. We're landlocked. We don't have anything like this where I'm from. You see that guy over there between those two cars on the right? Yeah, that's a local drunkard taking a piss. How delightful that was to see firsthand. When I said earlier that Harwich is unbelievably quaint and unbelievably cute, it's also unbelievably charming. While I didn't love seeing that man's penis just now, I must say that it did reinforce quite a few stereotypes I had of rural England. I think if I had to pick a place to live in Harwich, it might be in behind one of these doors. Maybe the red one or the blue one. This cute little brick paved sidewalk was just too irresistible to not walk through. After breezing through the city briefly, I located a pub and walked in. After a few hours at the pub, it was time for me to go back to the train station. It was roughly midnight, and I was surprised at just how friendly and welcoming the train station was, although it was empty. It was pretty well lit, and it didn't take long for the train to show up. After I arrived back at the port and started boarding my ferry, I took a few moments to stop and see what was going on. Truck after truck after truck was filling the cargo bay. And here's a picture of my cabin. This would be my first time riding on a boat like this, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. But the view outside my window turned out to be quite nice. This was the Hook of Holland. And once I got out onto the deck, I got a much better view. From the Hook of Holland, I caught my train into Amsterdam. As I walked through the train station, I began to realize that I really was in Europe now. You see, London is technically Europe, but it feels much more North American than proper Europe. For one, people speak English, all the signs are in English, but also all the movie stars and most of the media is recognizable. Here, I didn't see anything I recognized. Everything seemed to be different, and it didn't strike me just how different until I got up to the street level. Now, again, I seem to be the kind of person that no matter where I'm going, it's always the wrong place. I'm constantly wandering into some location that I have to then turn around and go back the way I came. So instead of leaving out the front doors where I just was like 5 minutes ago, I ended up wandering into the bowels of this train station. I think I was looking for a bathroom, and I found one, but as it turns out, you have to pay. And I didn't feel like paying, so I left. Finally, I was back to basically where I started and ready to exit the train station and see Amsterdam for the first time. You hear that Jesus freak over there? Since I started my trip in Europe, that's the first crazy person I've seen. Now, in North America, you see crazy people having mental breakdowns every other block. I was supposed to be experiencing culture shock here in Amsterdam, but the only shock that I really experienced was this lady having a psychotic episode screaming about Jesus. Otherwise, I felt basically like I was in paradise. Everything is mixed use here. There's so many transportation options available that the city is bustling with opportunity. People are riding their bikes everywhere. And the bike infrastructure, although not completely obvious here, will become a focal point of the videos that will follow. Here's my first time crossing bike infrastructure, and it was spectacular. I had to stop for a moment just to breathe it all in. This is the kind of urban living. This is the urban fabric that I've always wanted to witness for myself. In fact, I want to live here. Maybe not in Amsterdam proper, but in Europe for sure. One thing you'll notice about Amsterdam, and most people talk about bikes, but the walking. Almost everybody walks almost everywhere because everything is so available. Mixed use is everywhere, and biking infrastructure is everywhere, and walking infrastructure is also everywhere. It really is the best of all worlds. As I made my way through the city, looking for a place to sit down and have a meal, I started to feel overwhelmed. It seemed that there were just too many options. There was just too much going on. Now, it's not that I didn't want there to be options, and it's not that I didn't want things to be going on. It's that I just wasn't that used to it. Amsterdam isn't very much like London. London's a much slower-paced city. Amsterdam's more dynamic. It's more cultural, and the people are more sophisticated. Being from North America, I was very easily the dumbest person on this street. The level of sophistication I'm used to is basically like grammar school, whereas clearly I was in a university here in Amsterdam. I took a while to wander about, with no place in particular that I was going, just sort of in the general direction of my flat. Now, I had a flat rented for 8 days, and I was really in no rush to get there, although I was pretty tired from my travels. As it turns out, sleeping overnight on a giant ship isn't the easiest thing to get used to on your first time. And I woke up pretty regularly through the night as the boat rocked around back and forth in the open sea. One thing you'll notice is that this space is for people, and that car is infiltrating on our space. It's not welcome, and you get a sense of how unwelcome it is and how uncomfortable it makes you feel when you see it here in frame. When you're in a space that's designed for people, and there happens to be a car there, it's a little unnerving. I took this opportunity to get out of there and go somewhere else where it was less busy. You know, it really doesn't translate well just how nice it is and how nice it feels to be in these spaces. These old, narrow cobblestone streets with cafes and places to sit and eat and drink coffee just to the side are just wonderful to be amongst. And the people that you meet here are friendly and they smile. As I wandered through the streets, I was filled with this anxiety and inspiration and a real optimism about what the coming week would entail. I had 8 days here in Amsterdam, and at this time during the trip, I didn't know that I was going to get deathly ill. So these streets seemed like an endless sea of possibilities. Unfortunately, I wouldn't come to realize many of those possibilities because I'd be lying sick in bed. I can't wait to get back to Amsterdam and to explore all the places I didn't get to see because I was laid up in my bed. I finally got tired of walking and decided to pop into a Japanese restaurant to get a bowl of noodles. They had some pho, they had some ramen, and I was famished at this point.